the antithesis of the jump scare, the background scare is the mark of a horror director who's in it for the long haul. Rather than throwing itself at the screen, forcing you to react, the background scare lingers, waiting for you to cotton on and do the scaring all by yourself. This dedication to dramatic irony has made us unwitting participants in spooks, scares and screamers that the protagonists themselves are sometimes unaware of, and which have left undeniable marks on our psyches. So I'm Amy from What Culture, and here are 10 horror movie background scares that will scar you for life. 10. The Coke Boy, Insidious. Back in 2010, Insidious spawned a sizable franchise that is still going today, and it formed one of the pillars of modern blockbuster horror cinema alongside The Conjuring and The Purge. In the film, parents Josh and Renee Lambert summon a psychic and paranormal investigators to take back their new home from the malevolent forces that seem to have it under a hold, and of course to rescue their supernaturally comatose son, Dalton. Whilst there are plenty of scares in the film's 100 minutes of runtime, including more cheap and cheerful jump scares, there are a couple that director James Wan slipped in under the radar. In one scene, when Renee is unpacking by herself, she comes face to face with the old-timey spirit of a young boy, who dances and runs through the house to tiptoe through the tulips. What you might not have noticed on first viewing, however, is the ghost boy standing by the coat rack with his face to the kitchen wall. This is before Renee has ever laid eyes on him. Makes you wonder what else you may have missed. 9. The Floating Pazuzu Face, The Exorcist. Once hailed as the scariest horror film of all time, The Exorcist has been outspooked by many a chiller since then. Nevertheless, the 1973 classic holds a permanent place in the canon as one of the most gruesome godfathers of modern horror. The demon Pazuzu's possession of young Regan McNeil is anything but subtle, as he quite literally bends her right out of shape, but actually elsewhere in the house his spirit roams free. Most notably, in one scene, lights flicker throughout the McNeil house and Regan's mother Chris is in the kitchen when the demon's face flashes in the dark behind her. Originally included as a cutaway, advances in digital technology allowed the face to be inserted briefly into the frame for the director's cut, immersing the horror in the scene itself. And this is only one example of many. Director William Friedkin sought to unnerve viewers by having Pazuzu's face flash on screen throughout the film, and given the film's notoriety and longevity, it seems like this gambit worked. 8. The Babadook doesn't do the dishes. The Babadook. Few of us were ready for the Babadook when he crept onto our screens in 2014, bringing with him a new indie horror filmmaking sensibility that, in many ways, out A24's A24. Single mother Amelia is haunted by the violent death of her husband, whilst having to contend with her young son Samuel's fear that a monster from one of his storybooks lurks in their house. Australian made and shot like a small-town drama, the terror of the Babadook lies in the blurred boundaries between the supernatural and the psychological, leaving us wondering whether what we're seeing is really to be believed or just a product of a grief-damaged mind. While the monster himself is scarce throughout the film, one of his most undeniable manifestations comes when Amelia is at her most absent-minded washing the dishes. Catching her unaware, the monster's figure can be seen in the shadows of the neighbour's hallway, looming large, still and barely visible. Amelia breaks a dish, looks again and he's gone, but it's far too late to wipe the impression from our minds, never mind hers. You can't get rid of the Babadook. 7. The Over-the-Shoulder Hands, GONJIAM Haunted Asylum. The title sort of gives away the gist of this movie, in that it's set in a haunted asylum, and a bunch of paranormal enthusiasts head over there to film some sick content. I can't even say that they get more than they bargained for, because when you go to a haunted asylum looking for paranormal things, you're kind of bargaining for paranormal things to happen, no? Even if they were asking for it, what unfolds is beyond their greatest fears. Ghosts and ghouls lurk around corners and in the dark, some only visible through a camera's lens. And one of the most unintentionally effective background scares in the movie is just seeing the other characters in the background through the night vision, because you never know whether it's going to be one of the characters or if it's another ghost popping up. You know, it's subtle, I don't even know if it's on purpose, but it works. But that's not what we're talking about here. The background scare in question comes near the end of the film as a small group of the paranormal enthusiasts find themselves trapped in a large pitch-black room. Seen through the eye of their face-facing cameras, suddenly a pair of hands appears from the void of darkness to clasp the faces of each of them in turn. The movie is full of effective jump scares, and these mysterious hands are just one example, one that pays off especially well when accompanied by a quick flash of a bloody demonic face, presumably belonging to the owner of those hands. It's a background scare that turns into a jump scare, all the best things rolled into one. 6. The Grinning Librarian, It 2017. 2017's It saw Bill Skarsgård's creepy clown come giggling straight out of the box, putting an indelible stamp on contemporary horror culture and our nightmares as he terrified the children of the fictional northeastern town of Derry. However, director Andy Muschietti built layers of scares into every scene of the film, relying on Pennywise's ubiquity to ground even some of the most out-there apparitions. One scene in particular caught our eyes and minds, thanks in no small part to its inherent ambiguity. As Ben is researching Derry's history in the library, the librarian appears behind him, out of focus, but undeniably grinning and leering. When the camera's focus settles in again, however, she's simply sorting books on the shelves. Is it Pennywise in an old lady guise? Has the clown infected the townspeople? Or is she merely a weird, sinister old woman with nothing better to do than leer at the young boys? Whatever the case, once you've noticed this background detail, you'll never sleep again in the library. 5. Margaret and the Mannequin. Carrie. In Carrie, a supernaturally endowed teen suffers from intense bullying at high school and finds her telekinetic powers difficult to control, something that's only exasperated by the presence of her fanatically religious mother, Margaret. Following the infamous scene where Carrie is doused in pig's blood at prom and burns down the gymnasium in response, she returns home with the intention of taking a warm bath and waiting for it to all blow over. But Margaret has other ideas and attempts to murder her only child. In the lead up to this egregious act, however, director Brian De Palma treats us to a lingering pre-scare. Margaret is waiting for Carrie in the upstairs hallway, lit like a ghost and lurking in the background of the shot between a mannequin and the door. Though the camera briefly calls attention to Margaret, illuminating her face when Carrie turns on the bathroom light, she's in the scene for a whole 45 seconds beforehand, offering us as much time as possible to spot her on our own. This has to be an all-time record for background shenanigans. 4. Haunting the Hallway. The Strangers. Whilst The Strangers may not have the creative flair of funny games or the audience-pleasing comeuppance of You're Next, Brian Bertino's flick is one of modern horror's most effective home invasion films. Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman star as Kristen and James, a young couple in the midst of relationship troubles who've come to stay at James's childhood home following a friend's wedding. Some strangers appear at the door in the early hours of the morning, and soon they're inside and playing murderous games. Before they know anything is wrong, however, Kristen is alone in the kitchen smoking a cigarette when a hooded figure appears in the shadows of the hallway. He watches her for a whole 40 seconds before she looks around, but by then the man is gone. So chillingly effective was the staging of this scene that it was used as one of the central images of the film's marketing campaign, appearing on the posters alongside a typeface that was subsequently popularized, weirdly enough, by the Twilight series. 3. Doris loses her head. Ouija origin. Mike Flanagan loves himself a background scare, there's no two ways about it. In almost all of his films, and frequently in his series, placing ghosts and ghouls in the background of his scenes, irrespective of whether it's day or night, seems to be something he really enjoys. But it's in 2016's Ouija Origin of Evil that he really brings the dread. A prequel to 2014's lackluster Ouija, Origin of Evil takes us back to the roots of the series with the Xander family, whose youngest daughter Doris acts as a conduit for sinister spirits posing as benevolent forces, but with a murderous agenda. Convincing her sister's boyfriend Mikey to come alone in the basement with her and stick his arm in a wall, an out-of-focus Doris twitches in the background, her eyes going white. At the same time, her head starts shifting in a hideous doll-like fashion. Doris whispers demonic sweet nothings into Mikey's ear, and he's summarily dispatched with a bedsheet strung from the ceiling in one of the film's most predictable jump scares. But even that can't ruin this bone-breakingly horrifying moment. 2. It does what it says on the tin. It follows. Supernatural psychological horror It Follows helped demonstrate what the genre was capable of. At a time when the mainstream was all about big franchises, haunted houses, and jump scares, this came along offering us something different and something that was wildly better than a lot of the stuff we were getting at the time. In the movie, teenager Jay shares a passionate night with new boyfriend Hugh and becomes the next bearer of a fatal curse that's passed from person to person via, yeah, you guessed it, sexual intercourse. The curse of death manifests in friends and strangers alike, stalking Jay wherever she goes until it can finally get her in its grasp. Though we're suspicious of every background in this film, it can often take a minute to spot the monster, as it's always in the guise of another person. As a result, It Follows is essentially an entire film built around background scares. Some of Jay's stalkers are super subtle and never really have attention called directly to them, and then some of them are a naked woman walking towards an abandoned warehouse whilst Jay is tied to a wheelchair. You know, there's subtle and then there's not subtle. All this in mind, the school hallway scene transitions from the former to the latter, initially seeming rather inconspicuous until you notice the one person who's very out of place and very much coming for Jay. 1. Mum's on the Ceiling, Hereditary. Weirdly enough, this one actually missed me the first time I watched the movie because I must have had my brightness settings down. I was watching at night, and unfortunately that means I missed one of the best background scares on offer. It's hard to find a horror fan that hasn't seen Hereditary. It's been called by many people, and fairly deservedly in recent years, one of the best modern horror movies. Though young Charlie's gruesome decapitation provides the horror around which most of the rest of the film revolves, it's through miniatures artist Annie that the film presents the bulk of its most petrifying moments. Whilst many of these scenes wear their heart on their sleeve, or their forehead on the attic door, there is one moment that offers a deep and unsuspecting chill. Once everything starts kicking off, Dad's been burned alive, Sister's dead, and Mum is AWOL, Peter walks around the house trying to find what's going on. Seeing the charred remains of his father on the floor, the shot stays locked on Peter in a two-thirds kind of composition for a long while, giving people who have their brightness settings correctly configured on their laptop or watched it on the big screen the opportunity to notice that his mum is pinned up in the corner like a silent but deadly spider. Much like the kitchen scene in The Strangers, once Peter looks up to where she was, she's already gone, but we know she's creeping and crawling around the house somewhere, and we're terrified of where she's going to pop up next. Try getting a good night's sleep after that one. And with that, we've reached the end of this list of 10 horror movie background scares that will scar you for life. There are loads more out there, so let us know in the comments below which ones you would have included on this list. And remember to check out whatculture.com for more lists and articles like this every single day. As always, I've been Amy from whatculture.com, and I'll catch you next time.